A week before my son's wedding, I stood at my kitchen counter, with flour on my hands and a list in my head so long it felt like a second heartbeat. Roast beef for 150, 3 kinds of salad, trays of buttered rolls, lemon bars cooling in neat rows. I had promised to handle the entire buffet as my gift, my way of easing the cost and blessing their new beginning. It would come to about $3,000, but I wasn't counting pennies, I was counting memories. I'm 72, a widow who has learned to measure love in casseroles and centerpieces, in early mornings and aching feet. From the open patio door drifted laughter, the light, tinkling kind that usually warms a room but, that day, turned the air thin. My son, Marcus, was on the phone somewhere down the path, his voice muffled by work talk. Closer, at the wrought iron table I painted last spring, Tiffany sat with her sister, Audrey. I wasn't listening at first. I was doing numbers. Pounds of meat, pounds of ice, the right ratio of vinaigrette to honey. Then I heard my name. "Charlotte will watch the kids the whole night," Tiffany said, that sugar-sweet tone I'd come to know. "There are about 15 from babies to teens. She's used to it. This way the adults can enjoy themselves." Audrey laughed an easy, careless peal. "Smart. The old lady corrals the screaming brats while you dance. Perfect for the photos." Flour dried on my knuckles. In the reflection of the window, I saw my own mouth go still. "She won't even realize we're using her," Tiffany added, voice cooler now. "It's like having a free professional nanny for the evening, and since she'll be chasing kids, she won't eat much of the buffet. She's preparing more for the important guests." They laughed again. Something hot rose from my heels to my crown, anger, yes, but threaded with a humiliation that pressed hard on my chest. For 2 years I had welcomed Tiffany as the daughter I never had. She brought flowers, called me Miss Charlotte, asked for my recipes with bright, eager eyes. I taught her how my mother folded lemon zest into the sugar, how a centerpiece sits low so people can see each other across a table. I believed her kindness was respect. Footsteps approached. Marcus, done with his call. "What are my beautiful ladies laughing about?" he asked, the same warmth he used to have as a boy when he came home with scraped knees and big news. "I've organized everything," Tiffany said, switching back to honey. "Your mom will watch the kids so the ceremony and reception go smoothly." "My mom is an angel," Marcus said proudly. "Always willing to help." I stepped away from the curtain and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, knees trembling the way they did the first night I slept alone after cancer took my husband. On the nightstand, our life was a collage. Marcus in a cap and gown, the summer he learned to swim, a vacation sunset bleeding gold over a dark horizon. I sank to the edge of the bed and listened to the house breathe. 72 years, a lifetime of making things easier for the people I love, and now I was a solution, a service, an invisible pair of hands meant to move without asking. It wasn't the work that hurt, it was the decision made without me, the assumption that my love meant endless, unpaid labor, that my joy was to be useful and silent. When Tiffany visited later that week, she kissed my cheek and told me not to overdo it. "Relax and enjoy yourself," she said, patting my hand. I smiled, a careful porcelain thing, and nodded. Inside, something steady and old awakened, a spine I had forgotten I possessed. If they wanted to use me, they would learn the price of assuming. In the quiet of my room, I folded the shopping lists, closed the recipe book, and, with a calm that surprised me, began to change my plans. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of phone calls, deliveries, and Tiffany's cheerful check-ins. To anyone watching from outside, nothing seemed different. I baked, I tested sauces, I even hummed while kneading dough. But beneath the surface, a quiet resolve grew like a river carving stone. Every time Marcus called, "Mom, how's everything going? Do you need me to pick up the wine? Should I bring more trays?" I answered with the same steady reassurance. "Everything is perfect, son. Don't worry." And he believed me. He had always believed me. That was part of the problem. On Wednesday morning, 3 days after overhearing Tiffany and Audrey, I reached for the phone with trembling fingers. It wasn't Marcus I dialed. It was Loretta, my friend of 40 years, the woman who had sat beside me at funerals and danced with me at anniversaries, who knew the shape of my grief and the fire in my temper. "Lo," I said, not bothering with a greeting. "I need your help with a plan." There was a pause, then a laugh, low and knowing. "Charlotte Fitzgerald, from the sound of your voice, I already know someone's made you mad. Tell me everything." I did. I told her about the patio, the laughter, the words that had cut deeper than a knife. How Tiffany, for 2 years, had looked me in the eyes with that honey-sweet smile while seeing me as nothing more than free labor. Loretta listened without interruption, except for the occasional gasp when my voice cracked. When I finished, she exhaled hard into the receiver. "Charlotte, that girl is a snake. How dare she? After all you've spent, all you've done, and this is the thanks you get?" I closed my eyes. "It's not just the words, Lo. It's what they mean. I've been invisible in my own family, reduced to service. If I let this pass, it'll never stop. And what are you thinking of doing?" I laid it out step by step, the cancellations, the letter, the retreat. As the plan unfolded, Loretta burst into applause right through the phone line. "Charlotte, you're brilliant. That spoiled woman is going to get the shock of her life. Count me in, I'll even drive." By Thursday morning, the first part was in motion. I picked up the phone again, this time with a strange calmness that felt like armor. "Good morning, this is Charlotte Fitzgerald. I need to cancel my order for Saturday." One by one, I unraveled the tapestry I had spent months weaving, the caterers, the florist, the extra decorations I had promised. A few tried to charge me fees, but after decades of running a family business, I knew how to negotiate. With every confirmation of cancellation, my chest felt lighter, my breath steadier. Friday night, I zipped a small suitcase, 2 days' worth of clothes, my medications, my favorite book. I slid the coral dress from the closet, the one I had always saved for a day when I wanted to feel beautiful for myself, not for others. This time, it wasn't going to a wedding hall. It was going with me. When Marcus called, his voice was full of gratitude. "Mom, you're the best. We don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for the wedding." "You don't have to thank me for anything," I said softly, my words double-edged. "Tomorrow everything will go exactly as planned." And it would, but not in the way they expected. That night, lying in bed, sleep eluded me. Not from nerves, but from a thrill I hadn't felt in years. For once, I was not the servant of tradition or duty. For once, I was preparing to reclaim myself. Saturday dawned with a strange electric energy. I opened my eyes before the alarm, as if my body already knew this day would change everything. The house was hushed, but inside me was a pulse of anticipation I hadn't felt since girlhood, something between defiance and liberation. I showered, combed my silver hair until it glistened like strands of frost, and slipped into the coral dress. The mirror reflected not the tired widow, not the dutiful mother, but a woman standing firmly in her own skin. For the first time in years, I dressed for myself. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Loretta stood there with 2 suitcases and a grin that carried mischief. "Ready for your day of freedom, Charlotte?" "More than ready, Lo," I replied, hugging her tightly. "I've been waiting for this moment for 2 years without even knowing it." We loaded the car in silence, save for the clink of suitcases and the quick thud of my heart. Before leaving, I placed a folded letter on the kitchen table, Marcus's usual seat. My hand lingered on the paper, the words pressed deep into the page by my pen the night before. "Dear Marcus, by the time you read this, I'll be where I truly belong anywhere but in the role you and Tiffany quietly assigned me. I learned I was not to be a guest at your wedding, but the free nanny for 15 children, the silent laborer behind your buffet, so I canceled it all. Consider it a lesson. Labor has value, respect has value, and love without respect is nothing. I'll be back Sunday night. With love, but with dignity, Mom." I set the letter down like a stone lifted from my chest. As we pulled away, Loretta asked softly, "Are you sure, Charlotte? Once we start this drive, there's no turning back." I stared at the road stretching ahead, golden with morning Sunday. "Lo, I'm 72 years old. If I don't stand up for myself now, when will I?" The city blurred behind us as countryside rolled into view. Fields swayed in the early light, rivers flashed silver, and each mile felt like a stitch unpicking the heavy fabric of obligation. 2 hours later, we arrived at the spa, a retreat nestled by a lake, where gardens unfurled in precise beauty and the air smelled of lavender and pine. The receptionist greeted us with chilled mimosas. "Welcome, ladies. Your rooms are ready. Treatments begin in 1 hour. Is this a special occasion?" "Yes," I said, smiling wider than I had in years. "I'm celebrating my independence." As I stood on the balcony of my Lakeview room, I imagined what was happening back in the city. Guests arriving, Marcus checking his watch. Tiffany, radiant in white, but with eyes darting nervously. By now, someone would have discovered the empty kitchen, the missing buffet, the absence of the groom's mother. For the first time in a long time, I felt no guilt. Just freedom. By late morning, the spa had already worked its gentle magic. The air was scented with eucalyptus. The soft hush of water fountains replaced the chaos of city streets, and warm stones pressed into my shoulders as a masseuse coaxed years of tension from my body. For the first time in decades, I lay completely still, not listening for a phone, not bracing for someone to need me. And then, my phone did ring. At first I ignored it. The vibration trembled against the wood of the side table, a small creature begging for attention. I let it buzz itself into silence. 5 minutes later, it rang again. And again. Marcus's name glowed insistently across the screen. I turned the device face down. "Everything all right?" the masseuse asked gently, mistaking my smile for distraction. "Perfectly all right," I whispered. "Please, continue." But the calls multiplied. By the time my massage ended and I slipped into a soft robe, 17 missed calls blinked at me, accompanied by 8 desperate text messages. "Mom, where are you?" "Mom, we found your letter. Please call me urgently. The wedding starts in an hour. Where's the food? The guests are arriving. Please." Tiffany is crying. There are 15 children here and no one knows what to do with them. I set the phone down and laughed, not cruelly, but with a release that shook something free in my chest. For years I had been the safety net, the quiet problem solver who swooped in before anyone noticed the cracks, and now they were seeing what life looked like without me sewing the seams. At 3:00 the afternoon, curiosity nudged me. I powered the phone back on. Almost immediately it rang again. Marcus's voice burst through, frantic. "Mom, where are you? The guests are here, there's no food, no babysitter, nothing's ready. Tiffany won't stop crying." I leaned back in the spa chair, sipping chilled water with lemon. "Oh, hello, son. I'm at a lovely spa with Loretta. Just had a chocolate massage. How's your wedding going?" The silence on his end was deafening. Then came his desperate plea. "Mom, this can't be happening. The caterers are asking where the buffet is. People are asking who's watching the kids. You promised—" I cut him off gently, my voice as calm as still water. "No, Marcus. I promised a buffet when I thought I was a guest at your wedding. When I discovered I was the unpaid nanny, I changed my plans." The background erupted in chaos, children crying, adults shouting, Tiffany's high-pitched sobs. Marcus begged, his words tumbling over one another. "Please, Mom, come back. We'll pay you. We'll give you $500 to watch the kids." I laughed softly, the sound startling even me. $500? That's not even a fraction of what I spent on your wedding preparations. Besides, my coral dress wasn't made for running after other people's children. Another voice cut in Tiffany's, ragged, stripped of sweetness. "Charlotte, you can't do this to us. There are 150 guests here." "Oh, Tiffany," I murmured, savoring the steadiness in my own tone. "What you need is a professional nanny. I suggest the Yellow Pages. They charge about $10 an hour per child. Very reasonable." The silence that followed was long and heavy. In it, I heard the first crack in Tiffany's polished armor. On the other end of the line, I heard Tiffany's sharp inhale, followed by a trembling whisper that betrayed her. How do you know about that conversation with Audrey?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Sweetheart, walls have ears, especially when people speak so loudly on my patio." For the first time since she'd entered our family, Tiffany's voice faltered, stripped of its polished veneer. "Charlotte, please, can we talk about this later? Right now we need you." "No," I said firmly, my voice as steady as the lake outside my spa window. "What you need is honesty, and what I need is respect." I heard every word. How I was perfect for the job, how I wouldn't even notice you were using me, how I was like a free nanny. I also heard you laugh about how I wouldn't have time to eat from the buffet I spent thousands to prepare. Do you know what that feels like? There was a pause, filled only by the muffled chaos of children crying in the background. Marcus's voice broke in then, quieter, lower, almost the tone of a chastised boy. "Mom, did you really hear all that?" "Yes, Marcus," I answered, soft but unyielding. I heard it all, and the part that cut deepest wasn't Tiffany's laughter, it was your silence. You stood there while your fiancé mocked me and treated me like a servant, and you said nothing. The line went quiet except for the ruckus behind him. Then, as if on cue, a shrill voice shouted in the background, "Where's the woman who was supposed to watch the kids? My son just knocked over the cake." I almost pitied Marcus in that moment, caught between the fallout of his choices and the mess unraveling in real time. Almost. "Mom, please," he begged. "We'll fix this. We'll pay you $2,000, just please come and help us." I laughed again, a sound that came from somewhere deep, surprising even me with its freedom. $2,000, Marcus? If you had that to spare, you should have hired a caterer and a nanny from the beginning, instead of letting your mother spend her retirement and her energy on a wedding where she wasn't even considered a guest. Loretta, sitting across from me on the terrace, raised her glass of wine and mouthed, "Brilliant." On the phone, Tiffany's composure snapped. "You're selfish. You ruined my wedding." "No, Tiffany," I replied with calm steel. "You ruined your wedding the moment you decided saving money mattered more than showing respect. I simply refused to be an accomplice to my own humiliation." In the background, I heard Marcus's voice breaking under the weight of it all. "Mom, the kids are running wild. Tiffany is in tears. The guests are furious. Please, please, just come back." I closed my eyes, breathed in the lavender-scented air, and felt lighter than I had in years. "Son," I said softly, "I'm not coming back. Not today. Not for this. Enjoy your wedding. I'll enjoy my freedom." And with that, I hung up, the weight of decades lifting as the line went dead. The moment I ended the call, the silence that followed was like music. For years, I had carried the constant hum of responsibility, the endless pull of being the dependable one. Now, that tether had been cut. Loretta reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes sparkling. "Charlotte, you've just done something most women our age only dream of. You stood up for yourself." Back in the city, though, I knew chaos was spilling through the reception hall like water through a broken dam. Children, promised a babysitter, were running unchecked. Parents grew anxious, voices rising, tempers short. The buffet tables stood empty, covered only with white cloths, while guests whispered and shifted uncomfortably. Tiffany's perfectly choreographed day was unraveling thread by thread. The text messages kept coming, even after I silenced the phone. "Mom, we had to order pizza for everyone. It cost $1,200. 3 families already left, furious about the kids. Tiffany is in the bathroom crying, says you destroyed the most important day of her life. The photographer keeps asking where you are for family pictures. I don't know what to tell him." One number I didn't recognize read, "Miss Charlotte, I'm Carol, mother of one of the children. Several of us are upset we were told someone would watch the kids, but there's no one. What they did to you is wrong." That message stopped me. In the middle of their chaos, there were others who saw the truth. I wasn't the villain here. I was simply refusing to play the part they had written for me. As the spa day turned to evening, Loretta and I shared dinner on the terrace. Salmon, fresh greens, a crisp glass of white wine. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a familiar voice. Elena, my sister-in-law. "Charlotte, what on earth happened?" Marcus called me crying. He said you abandoned the wedding. I told her everything. Every word I had overheard, every cruel laugh, every assumption that I was theirs to command. When I finished, Elena's reply was immediate, her voice firm. "You did the right thing. My brother would have been furious if he knew Marcus and that girl treated you like this. It was time someone opened their eyes." Her words steadied me. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. People were beginning to see the truth, and not just strangers like Carol, but family too. By 10 o'clock that night, I sat on the spa balcony, wrapped in a robe, listening to the water lap gently at the lakeshore. My phone buzzed once more. A final message from Marcus. "Mom, the wedding is over. It was a disaster. Tiffany says she'll never forgive me for letting you ruin it. Why are you doing this? I thought you loved me." The words stung, but I typed my reply slowly, deliberately. "Marcus, I do love you. I always have. But love without respect is not love at all. A son who truly loves his mother does not let his wife use her as an unpaid servant. I love you, but I also love myself. It was time you learned that." I set the phone down. For the first time in years, I felt peace wash over me like the quiet waves on the lake. The next morning, I awoke to birdsong and sunlight spilling through lace curtains. My body felt lighter, as though years of unspoken burdens had finally been set down. No alarm, no demands, no one waiting at the kitchen table for me to serve them breakfast. Just quiet, glorious quiet. Loretta was already downstairs at the spa cafe when I joined her. She studied me over the rim of her coffee cup and smiled. "You look 10 years younger this morning, Charlotte." "I feel it," I admitted. "It's been so long since I've woken up without anxiety gnawing at me." Over fresh fruit and warm croissants, we talked about books we wanted to read, trips we had dreamed of but never taken. For once, the conversation wasn't about who needed what from me or what family duty I was expected to fulfill. It was about us two women reclaiming the right to dream. But when I turned my phone back on, reality came rushing in. Overnight, dozens of messages had piled up. "Mom, Tiffany says she can't live in the same city as someone who ruined her wedding." "Mom, we're thinking of moving away." "Mom, I don't understand how you could do this to me. Please answer." And then, a quieter one, arriving after midnight. "Mom, Tiffany admits maybe we didn't treat you right. Can we talk when you get back?" That single word may be stuck in my chest like a thorn. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. It was hesitation, a half step, as if respecting me was still negotiable. Loretta leaned over, reading the text with me. "They're scrambling, Charlotte, but that last message, it's not enough, is it?" "No," I said firmly. "Not after what I heard with my own ears. Respect isn't something you maybe give your mother. It's either there or it isn't." The rest of that day at the spa was blissful. We soaked in the private jacuzzi, we let the heat of mineral water soften our bones, and when I closed my eyes, I felt my husband beside me again, his steady hand reminding me that I had every right to stand tall. By the time Loretta and I drove home Sunday afternoon, I had already decided this wasn't about Tiffany anymore. This was about Marcus. He had let it happen. He had stood by while I was belittled. And now, it was his turn to face me not as a groom, not as someone's husband, but as my son. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of fire, the doorbell rang. Through the window I saw him. Marcus, standing alone, his head bowed. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of the ruined wedding still pressed him down. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and opened the door. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice soft, hoarse, almost childlike. "Come in, Marcus," I answered, stepping aside. "We need to talk." Marcus stepped into the living room like a man walking into a courtroom, each step heavy, deliberate. He lowered himself onto the sofa while I settled into my armchair, the same spot where I had read bedtime stories to him decades earlier. For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke, his voice cracked. "Mom, I have to apologize." I folded my hands in my lap, waiting. He needed to say it fully, not rush past it. "Tiffany and I talked all night after the wedding," he continued, staring down at his shoes. "At first she was furious with you. She said you'd destroyed everything. But when I told her what you overheard, how you heard everything, she realized how cruel it sounded." "And you?" I asked quietly. Marcus lifted his head, and I saw shame cloud his eyes. "I realized that for the last 2 years, I've been treating you like an employee instead of my mother, always assuming you'd do anything I asked. I didn't even think to ask if you wanted to." The words should have softened me, but I kept my voice firm. "Do you know how that feels, Marcus? To be reduced to usefulness? To be loved only for what I can provide?" He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "It feels horrible, Mom. I feel ashamed. Dad would be furious with me if he were alive. He'd tell me I failed you." That mention of his father stirred something deep inside me, but I didn't let it sway me. "Your father always defended me, Marcus. Always. And that's what you should have done when Tiffany mocked me to her sister." "I know," he whispered. "I should have stood up for you. I should have said something. I didn't want to upset her." "And instead, you upset me," I replied sharply. He winced as though the truth itself had weight. Silence stretched again, until Marcus finally dared to meet my eyes. "Mom, do you forgive me?" I let out a slow breath. "Marcus, forgiveness isn't a word you can earn in a single conversation. Forgiveness is built with actions repeated, consistent actions. You'll have to show me, with time, that things have changed. Until then, I can't say the wound is healed." He nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I'll prove it, Mom. I swear I will." I studied him for a long moment, seeing not just my son but the boy I had raised, bright, kind, but too easily swayed by charm. If Tiffany was to stay in his life, she too would have to face me, not with excuses, but with truth. "Marcus," I said finally, "this isn't just about you. Tiffany has to understand that I'm not her servant. If she wants me in her life, she'll need to show me respect." He nodded again. "She knows. She wants to apologize too, but she thought I should talk to you first." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of his words pressing against years of exhaustion. If she truly wants to apologize, I'll listen, but if it's just to keep the peace, she shouldn't bother. I don't want empty words. Marcus's eyes glistened, his voice breaking. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for giving us a chance." I looked at him steadily. "This is your only chance, Marcus. Don't waste it." 2 days later, at precisely 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I had been expecting it, though my heart still raced as I rose to answer. When I opened the door, Tiffany stood there not in bridal silk or polished perfection, but in a plain blouse and jeans, her hair tied back, her face bare of makeup. For once, there was no rehearsed smile, no practiced charm, only vulnerability. "Hi, Miss Charlotte," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "Thank you for seeing me." I stepped aside. "Come in, Tiffany." She sat gingerly on the edge of the sofa, as though she might flee at any moment. I remained in my armchair, my safe haven, and waited. The silence stretched until it pressed against her, forcing the words out. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her hands twisting in her lap. "Start with the truth," I told her. Her eyes filled with tears before she even spoke. "I want to apologize for everything I said about you to Audrey. It was cruel, disrespectful, and wrong." I didn't move. "And why did you say it?" Tiffany looked down, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Because I've never had a mother-in-law before. My mom died when I was 15, and my father's second wife never wanted me. When I met Marcus, and then you, I didn't know how to handle it. You intimidated me, Miss Charlotte. You're so capable, so respected by everyone. I felt like I'd never measure up. And your solution was to belittle me? To use me? My voice was quiet but sharp. Tiffany winced, tears sliding down her cheeks. It wasn't conscious at first. I told myself I was just being practical, making things easier. But the truth is I was jealous. I wanted Marcus's attention, and deep down I thought if I painted you as someone to keep busy, I could hold on to him more tightly. I see now how wrong that was. For the first time since meeting her, I believed her tears. They weren't crocodile tears for show. They were raw, messy, human. "And how do you feel now?" I asked. "I feel ashamed. I feel guilty. And I feel like I lost something I didn't even realize I wanted a real relationship with you. You raised the man I love. I should have treated you like family, not like staff." Her honesty pierced through the armor I had built around myself. Still, I stayed firm. "Tiffany, I can't be your mother. That place belongs to the woman you lost. But I can be your mother-in-law, and that means mutual respect, nothing less." She nodded quickly. "That's all I want, Miss Charlotte. A chance to start over. I promise I will ask before I assume anything. I will respect your boundaries. And if you ever say no, I won't try to make you feel guilty. I'll accept it." I let her words settle in the room, weighing them carefully. Finally, I said, "I'll give you one chance, Tiffany. Only one. If you ever treat me like an employee again, there will be no second chance." Her tears spilled faster, but she managed a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. I won't waste it." For the first time, I saw Tiffany not as a polished stranger, but as a flawed, frightened young woman who might just be willing to change. The next 2 weeks were quiet, eerily quiet. No hurried phone calls asking if I could whip up a casserole for a last-minute dinner. No text messages assuming I'd watch their dog or pick up decorations. No knocks on my door with Tiffany smiling sweetly and handing me a list of little favors. At first, I thought the silence was punishment that they had retreated to sulk and let me sit alone in my house with my pride. But then, slowly, I realized it wasn't punishment at all. It was space. For the first time in years, my time was entirely mine. I tended to my garden, weeding the flower beds I'd neglected. I pulled out half-finished embroidery from the drawer. I even allowed myself to sit in the porch swing and read a book cover to cover, the way I used to before widowhood and obligation filled every spare hour. Then, one evening near the end of that second week, the phone rang. Marcus's name lit the screen. My stomach clenched. Old habits die hard, but I forced myself to answer calmly. "Hi, Mom." His tone was careful, almost nervous. I wanted to ask you something." "Go ahead, Marcus." "Tiffany's birthday is on Saturday. I want to throw her a surprise party. I've already hired a caterer, booked the venue, and sent out invitations. I was wondering if you'd help me with the decorations. You have such a great eye for that kind of thing." He hesitated, then added, "Of course I'll pay you for your time and ideas." His words startled me. For once, he wasn't assuming. He had planned everything himself. He was asking for something specific and offering to compensate me. "You don't need to pay me, Marcus," I said after a pause. "Decorating is something I can do as a gift, but I appreciate that you asked, instead of assuming." His relief was audible. "Really? You'll help me?" "Yes," I said. "It sounds sweet, but remember, if I change my mind or get tired, you'll need to hire someone else." "Of course, Mom," he promised quickly. That Saturday, I joined Marcus in his backyard early in the morning. Golden balloons and fresh flowers waited in boxes. We worked side by side, stringing lights along the fence, arranging bouquets in vases, draping fabric across the tables. For the first time in years, it felt like teamwork, not servitude. When the last lantern was hung, Marcus stood back and looked around with pride. "Mom, this looks beautiful. Tiffany's going to love it." I smiled, my hands still dusted with glitter from the decorations. "She'll see how much you care." That evening, when Tiffany walked into what she thought was a simple dinner and instead saw friends shouting, "Surprise!" her expression broke into tears, not of frustration this time, but of joy. She turned to Marcus, hugging him tightly, and then walked straight to me. "Miss Charlotte," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "thank you. Everything looks gorgeous. Thank you for helping him make this so special." Her hug felt different, genuine, not staged for approval. And for the first time since the wedding, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, she meant it. The weeks after Tiffany's birthday unfolded differently than any I could remember. For the first time in years, I wasn't treated like an endless well of favors. Instead, small but telling signs began to appear, gestures that hinted at a shift, however fragile. At Sunday dinner, Tiffany didn't hand me a knife and cutting board the moment I walked in. Instead, she pulled out a chair. "Miss Charlotte, please sit. You're our guest tonight." The word guest caught me off guard. I'd been so accustomed to bustling around their kitchen, cooking half the meal, while Tiffany smiled sweetly and pretended it was family bonding. This time, she and Marcus served me. I ate slowly, savoring not just the food but the unfamiliar sensation of being honored instead of used. Another afternoon, Tiffany called not to ask me to do something, but to share a piece of news. "I tried your lemon bar recipe," she confessed, laughter in her voice. "It didn't turn out nearly as good as yours, but Marcus ate half the tray anyway." She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't fishing for me to bake her a batch. She was simply including me, like family should. Still, my guard stayed up. Every kind word, every careful gesture I weighed in my heart. Was it genuine remorse? Or just a performance until the sting of the ruined wedding faded? One evening, Marcus joined me on the porch swing at my house. The air smelled of honeysuckle, and the sky was fading to violet. He leaned back, long legs stretched out, and sighed. "Mom, you've been different lately. Lighter, happier." "That's what happens," I said, "when people stop assuming your life belongs to them." He winced, but nodded. "I deserve that." After a pause, he added, "I see now that Tiffany and we treated you badly. We didn't mean to, but we did. And I want you to know, I'll never let it happen again." I studied his face, the boy I once carried in my arms, now older, worn from mistakes. "Words are a beginning, Marcus. Actions matter more." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I've started therapy with Tiffany. We're both trying to learn." That startled me. Therapy was something I never thought my son would agree to, too proud, too set in his ways. Maybe this truly was different. That night I went to bed with cautious hope warming my chest. I had demanded respect, and for the first time I was beginning to see it take root. 3 months after the disastrous wedding, Tiffany called and asked if I would meet her for lunch. Just the two of us. Her voice carried no sugary pretense, no carefully polished charm, only a nervous sincerity that surprised me. We met at a quiet little cafe near my house. When I walked in, she was already seated at a small corner table, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. Gone were the flashy dresses and perfect curls. She wore a simple blouse, her hair in a loose ponytail. For once, she looked less like a bride desperate for approval and more like a young woman trying to find her footing. "Miss Charlotte," she greeted, standing as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I sat down, ordered a cup of tea, and waited. I wanted her to start. She swallowed, her eyes glistening. "I need to tell you something personal. Since the wedding, I've been going to therapy." I blinked, caught off guard. "Therapy? Why?" "Because I realized," she paused, searching for words. "I have a problem with mother figures. When my mom died, I never dealt with it. I built walls, pushed away older women who tried to care for me. When I met you, instead of letting myself appreciate you, I felt threatened. So I made jokes, I minimized you, I tried to keep you busy so you wouldn't get too close. It was easier to mock you than to risk loving you and losing you too." For the first time since I'd known her, Tiffany's voice cracked without performance. Her tears weren't weapons this time, they were confessions. I sipped my tea slowly, giving her space. "That must have been very painful." "It was," she admitted. "But I didn't even realize it until that night at the wedding when you didn't show up. For the first time I saw clearly what I had done. I'd tried to turn Marcus into someone who put me above you, who ignored you. And that's wrong. You're his mother. You raised him into the man I love. I should have honored that." She reached across the table, tentative. "Miss Charlotte, can we start over? Not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law locked in competition, but as two women, two family members trying to respect each other?" Her words touched something in me, though I stayed cautious. "Tiffany, I'll never forget what I overheard. That wound won't vanish overnight. But if you're serious about change, I'll give you one chance. Just one. And you'll have to prove it through your actions, not your promises." She nodded quickly, her hands trembling. "I understand, and I will." When we parted that afternoon, her hug felt different, hesitant but genuine. And as I walked home beneath the golden glow of late summer sun, I allowed myself the smallest seed of hope that perhaps, one day, we could share more than strained smiles. 2 weeks after our lunch, the true test arrived quietly, unexpectedly, the way life always chooses its moments. It was a Friday evening when Marcus called. His voice carried a nervous tremor I hadn't heard in months. "Mom, I need to ask you something." I braced myself. Old habits stirred my instinct to say yes before even hearing the request, but I forced myself to wait. "Go ahead, Marcus. Tiffany's birthday is tomorrow. I want to throw her a little surprise in the backyard. Nothing big, just some friends, some decorations. I already hired a caterer and booked a musician. I only need your help with the decorations because, well, you're good at it, but, Mom," his paws stretched, "only if you want to. And if you don't, I'll hire someone else. No pressure." I leaned against the counter, heart thudding in a rhythm both strange and liberating. My son had finally learned to ask, not assume. "You don't need to pay me, Marcus," I said softly. "I'll help. Consider it my gift to her. But I appreciate the way you asked." The next morning I arrived early. Golden balloons and strings of lights lay in boxes, waiting. Marcus met me at the door, sleeves rolled up, eyes bright. Together we worked side by side, him hauling tables, me arranging flowers, both of us laughing at small mishaps like when the wind caught the tablecloths and nearly sent them flying. "Mom," Marcus said after a while, wiping sweat from his brow, "I need you to know something. I love Tiffany, but I also love you. And I've finally realized loving my wife doesn't mean neglecting my mother. It doesn't have to be one or the other." My throat tightened. For so long, I had felt pushed aside, invisible. Now, his words were a balm. "I'm glad you understand that, Marcus. That balance is what family should be." When Tiffany walked in later that evening, expecting only a quiet dinner, she froze in the doorway. Friends and family shouted surprise, while music swelled. The yard glittered with lights, the tables adorned with the flowers I had arranged. Tears filled her eyes, But this time they weren't born of frustration or panic. They were soft, humbled tears of gratitude. She turned to me before hugging anyone else. "Miss Charlotte, thank you, this is beautiful. Thank you for making my birthday so special." Her arms wrapped around me, not possessive, not staged, but warm. For the first time, I let myself hug her back without hesitation. And in that brief moment, I felt something fragile and new take root. Not trust yet, not forgiveness, but possibility. For a while, things seemed almost ordinary. Marcus stopped treating me like an endless resource, and Tiffany made small but noticeable efforts inviting me to dinner, including me in conversations, even asking my opinion without dismissing it. It was progress. But wounds, even when covered, have a way of aching when pressed. Mine was no exception. One Sunday afternoon, I was at their house for dinner. The table was beautifully set, the food catered instead of cooked by my hands, a small but significant change. We were in the middle of a pleasant conversation when Tiffany's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, excused herself, and stepped onto the patio. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but the sliding door was left slightly ajar, and her voice drifted in. "No, Audrey, it's not like that anymore," she said, her tone urgent, almost defensive. "I know what I said before, but things are different now. Miss Charlotte isn't, well, she isn't what I made her out to be. She deserves better than how we treated her." I froze. My chest tightened. The words weren't cruel this time, but they carried the sharp reminder of that afternoon on the patio months ago. The memory of their laughter, their mockery, returned with full force. Marcus noticed my stillness. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, son. Just thinking." But inside, a storm swirled. No matter how sincere Tiffany seemed now, the echo of her contempt haunted me. Could trust really grow where ridicule had once been so deeply rooted? That night, back home, I lay awake long after the house fell silent. I thought about my husband, about the lessons he'd left me with. Respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you demand by standing tall. Tiffany was trying, yes. But forgiveness wasn't a door I could fling open with one good gesture or two. It had to be built brick by brick, day by day. The next time Tiffany called to invite me to lunch, I agreed. But as I hung up the phone, I whispered to myself, "Not yet. I don't trust her yet." The following week, Tiffany invited me again, this time to the same little cafe where we'd first spoken honestly. She arrived early, waiting nervously with both hands clasped around a mug of tea that had already gone cold. "Miss Charlotte," she began, her voice quiet but steady, "there's something I haven't told you, something I need you to hear from me directly." I folded my hands on the table. "Go on." She took a long breath. "Since the wedding, I've been in therapy every week. At first I went because I felt guilty, but then I realized I've been carrying wounds for years. My mom's death, my stepmother's rejection, the fear of never being enough. I buried all that hurt, and when Marcus brought me into your life, I projected it onto you. You weren't the enemy, but I treated you like one." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "The truth is, I was terrified of you. Terrified that Marcus's love for you meant there wouldn't be enough left for me. So I tried to control, to minimize, to push you into a corner where you couldn't threaten me. It was selfish and cruel." I sipped my tea slowly, letting her words hang in the air. They stung, but they also rang with something I had waited for, unpolished honesty. "And what do you feel now?" I asked. "I feel ashamed, but also relieved. Relieved because I don't want to compete with you anymore. I want to learn from you, to treat you with respect, maybe even someday to love you like family." The cafe was quiet except for the clink of dishes and the soft murmur of other patrons. I studied Tiffany's face stripped of its practiced smiles, raw with vulnerability. For once, there was no performance. Just a young woman confessing her fears. "Tiffany," I said slowly, "I can't promise trust overnight. You wounded me deeply, but I will give you this. The chance to show me, through your actions, that you mean what you say." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She nodded. "I'll take that chance, and I won't waste it." For the first time, I reached across the table and touched her hand. Not a mother's embrace, not yet, but a gesture of cautious hope. It was 6 months after the wedding when Marcus and Tiffany invited me over for dinner. Their voices on the phone had carried an unusual excitement, and I suspected something was stirring. When I arrived, Marcus could hardly keep still. Tiffany stood beside him, her hands nervously folded across her stomach. At last, Marcus blurted it out. "Mom, we're having a baby." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then joy burst through me, unstoppable. "Oh, Marcus," I whispered, pulling him into my arms. Then I turned to Tiffany, who looked at me with tear-bright eyes. She reached for my hands. "We wanted you to be the first to know," she said softly, "and we want to ask something important." I braced myself. Old fears stirred, memories of being used, of being assumed, but Tiffany's next words caught me off guard. "We don't want to assume anything about your role as a grandmother," she continued. "We want you to choose. If you want to be the grandma who comes for tea and stories once a week, that's perfect. If you want to babysit occasionally, also perfect. We'll never expect or demand more than what you're willing to give." Marcus nodded, his voice steady. "It's your decision, Mom. Completely." Tears welled in my eyes. For decades I had given without question. And now, finally, they were offering me something I had longed for: freedom. "I choose," I said slowly, my voice thick with emotion, "to be the kind of grandmother who is present when needed, who brings love freely, but who also has her own life and her own dreams. That balance is what makes love healthy." Tiffany squeezed my hand, and for the first time since I'd met her, I felt something genuine pass between us, a promise, fragile but real. Later that evening, when I sat alone in my car before driving home, I whispered to the night sky, "Thank you, not just for the grandchild on the way, but for the lesson hard won. That love without respect is not love at all, and that it's never too late even at 72 to demand both." A year after the wedding that had once threatened to shatter everything, I found myself standing in a bookstore surrounded by laughter, chatter, and the warm smell of paper and ink. In my hands was a copy of Cooking with Love, Serving with Dignity, Recipes and Reflections of a Modern Grandma, the book I had finally written, the dream I had carried for decades but never dared to pursue. Marcus had organized the launch party himself. He greeted guests at the door, pride shining in his eyes. Tiffany, now gently cradling her growing belly, moved through the crowd, introducing me to friends as her mother-in-law spoke in not with irony or contempt, but with pride. For once the title felt right. When it came time for me to speak, I stepped to the small podium, my voice trembling at first, then steadying as I looked out at the faces gathered there. "This book isn't just about recipes," I began. "It's about dignity. It's about the difference between giving out of love and being used out of convenience. It's about remembering that service without respect is slavery, but service given freely, with honor, is love." The audience was silent, listening, many nodding, some with tears in their eyes. For a moment, I saw not just family and friends, but a reflection of every woman who had ever sacrificed silently and longed to be seen. Afterward, Tiffany approached me. Her voice was hushed, her eyes shining. "Miss Charlotte. May I call you Mom Charlotte now? You've earned that place in my heart. You've taught me more about respect and love than I ever learned growing up." I felt the sting of tears. "Yes, Tiffany, I would love that." She hugged me then, and this time, it wasn't careful or hesitant. It was whole and real and long overdue. Later that night, as I signed copies of my book, I thought back to the moment that had changed everything: the overheard laughter on the patio, the sting of betrayal, the letter I left on my kitchen table. Walking away from that wedding had been the hardest choice of my life, but it had also been the most important. Because sometimes, the most powerful way to say yes to your family, to your dignity, to your dreams, is to finally, bravely, say no. The house was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet I once feared but now embraced. I sat in my favorite armchair, a cup of tea warming my palms, my new book resting on the table beside me. From the porch, the night wind carried the scent of blooming jasmine, and for the first time in decades, I felt no weight on my chest, only stillness, only freedom. Marcus called every few days now, not with demands but with conversations. Sometimes he'd ask about a recipe, sometimes he just wanted to hear my voice. Tiffany, true to her promise, asked before assuming, listened before speaking. Whether her change would last forever, I couldn't know, but for now, her words and actions aligned. And yet, even with these new beginnings, shadows lingered. Trust, once broken, never fully returns in its old form. It remakes itself, cautious and fragile. At night, when the house creaked with its old bones, I still heard echoes of that cruel laughter from the patio the day I learned how little they valued me. Soon, a grandchild would be born into this family, innocent of all the wounds and lessons that came before. Would Tiffany truly respect me when she needed help with her baby? Would Marcus remember that a mother's love does not equal endless servitude? Or would old habits creep back in when sleepless nights and exhaustion tested their promises? I didn't know. What I did know was this: for the first time in 72 years, I had drawn a line that no one would cross again. A line carved not out of anger, but out of love. Love for myself, and for the family I refused to let trample me into silence. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered into the stillness, not sure if I was speaking to my late husband, to God, or to myself. Sometimes dignity is the greatest gift we leave our children, even if it costs us everything. The tea grew cold in my hands, but I kept sitting there, listening to the night, wondering quietly if my family had truly learned the lesson, or if this was only the calm before another storm.